Marion Charles Gray, United States Army, World War II. Marion is one of the most dearest people I've ever met in my life. He was just a wonderful man. I met him in Groveport, Ohio. Him and his wife Ruthie, it was May 26, 2004, almost 20 years ago, folks. He was in his mid-80s. I also met him again and his wife. I had dinner with them in Columbus, Ohio at a Battle of the Bulge reunion. This was 2008 in September. Such fond memories of my interview with Marion. You're going to love this interview, folks. He served as a combat medic with the 116th Regiment, 29th Infantry Division, which is a part of the Big Red One, the 1st Infantry Division. Folks, incredible story. He landed in the first wave of Omaha Beach, received a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star for his service in the military, and just, like I said, he's just a unique individual. You'll see what I mean when you listen to him talk. Just a great, really articulate man. Just love him and miss him. He died in 2015. He was like 96, I believe. He lived a good, long life, and we'll see him soon. I know that, but I want to thank Chet Howard. Chet has sponsored some of my stories and is helping me re-edit the Holocaust film that I've produced. And Chet, I want to thank you, sir. Your comments touch my heart so much. I want to look in this camera. You're gonna hear this introduction, but Chet, I so appreciate you. Hope to meet you someday in person. I think you live in Ohio too, by the way. Marion is from Groveport, Ohio. And I've done a lot of work in Ohio with my veterans. I've done school presentations. My first veteran that I interviewed that passed away, I buried him in Ohio. So a lot I've done in Ohio. So, but Chet, thank you. God bless you, and I hope to continue to work with you, and I look forward to your comments. It's a blessing for me. Folks, if you'd like to sponsor a story like Chet has, please, there's information in the video description below this video. On my website, larrycappetto.com, there's a link that says Sponsor a Vet. If you click on it, it'll take you to a page with a lot of my veterans, pictures of my veterans. If you'd like to sponsor one of those, just include their name in the sponsorship and I'll do the rest. If you'd like to donate to my work, some people donate to my work, and that's most encouraged. This is a listener-supported channel, and so is my radio station. There's a link in the comment section of every video. The top comment is mine. You can find the link there, so I would appreciate your support and your help. Okay, folks, let's go back to Normandy, D-Day, June 6, 1944, through the eyes and ears of Marion Gray. What a great story he tells, and I think you'll agree with me once you listen to it. So subscribe to this channel, share this video and all my videos, and I look forward to having you on my future broadcasts. God bless you.
(116th Infantry Regiment) as a combat medical man.
Okay. Tell me just about, I know you probably have told this story before, but what do you remember about the night before the landing? Were you anticipating what actually happened? Did you guys go to a prayer service? Did you have a last meal? Tell me about the night before D-Day. What do you remember?
We had a dinner the day before, because we was on the boat on June the 5th, see, because that was when Overlord D-Day was supposed to take place. But we had a meal. It was on, I think the day before, on June the 4th, if I'm not mistaken. And the general came in and he said, I want you to look at the one on your left and the one on your right. after today, you may never see them again. And so after Saving Private Ryan, I went to see Saving Private Ryan for the first time, but I left shortly after it started because it brought back memories of that morning on June the 6th. So I went back and watched Saving Private Ryan. And then I wrote a story, Just a Dream, about that day when it was around midnight when I arrived home, and as I laid down to rest, I had a dream that I took my little grandson back to Normandy again. And we walked along the beach, and we went to St. Lo, Cherbourg, Aachen, and the Buchenwald concentration camp where the crematory still seemed warm. And then all of a sudden we were standing in fields of little white crosses. And as we walked along, I knelt down and I wiped the dust off the face of the cross so as the name would be more legible to my eyes. And then my grandson said, "Who's that?" I said, "A friend of mine." And then as we continued walking along, I knelt down again. He said, "Who's that?" And I said, "Another friend of mine." And as we kept on walking, all of a sudden I remembered our last breakfast together when the general came in and he said, "I want you to look at the one on your left and the one on your right. After today, you may never see them again." Subconsciously, was I looking for the names of the one on my left and the one on my right. And my grandson started running. I couldn't keep up. Time had overtaken my youth, and I ran very slowly. And when I looked up, I saw a large cross. It was so large it casted a shadow over all the little crosses in the field, like a sunset in the evening. And I saw my grandson wiping the dust off the base of that cross, looking for a name. He could not find a name. But when he looked up, he was filled with great excitement. And he said, "Who's this? Who's this?" And I told him about Jesus being crucified upon the cross, that he does not lay beneath the ground, because on the third day he arose to be with his heavenly Father. Now you see the difference? Jesus does not lie at the foot of the cross. Only those who lie beneath those little crosses has made it possible for you and I to enjoy this day together. You see, they have given us an earthly freedom, where Jesus has given us an eternal freedom. And I ended that story that maybe someday I would return to Europe and find the names of the one on my left and the one on my right. And in July of 2001, a French couple here, Stan and Gigi Lewinsky, who owns the Chatelaine French restaurant in Columbus, sent Ruthie and I back to all expenses paid to where I wanted to go. And they sent their daughter rather, Charlotte, along as our translator, as they were born after the war. And they came over here and settled in this country. And we traveled to all the places, except up to Buchenwald. We stayed mostly in France at the time. And then I went to St. Lo, and before I tell you about that,
Let's go back to D-Day now, the actual landing. I need to get some of this story from you. The night before, you told me a little bit. Tell me about the morning of D-Day, June 6th. Where were you, and did you get off with the transport onto the smaller landing craft? Tell me about your ride into shore.
I'll tell you just a little story about that. I was standing at the rail of a transport ship that was pushing through the water, and another soldier came and stood beside me. I did not know him, and he did not know me. And we could hear aircraft flying over to distant targets unknown to us. Soon they would be flying into hellish gunfire, but little did we know that we would be flying into the same. And so our names were being called later that morning like a conductor on a train, and we went to where our names were being called and climbing down rope ladders to the landing craft that was moving in the waves. But we were not alone. There were other landing crafts circling their mothership like a duckling circuits a mother. And then the conductor says, all aboard. And we were a sea of young men heading into destiny. And we rode the high waves, and the tips of waves would flash our faces, and then with shells bursting all around, but we could not turn back. And later the ramp was lowered, and there were those who jumped into the water that never touched dry ground, and those that did never lived to see the sun rise the next morning. It was chaos in the bowels of hell, and it continued through the day. And I was wounded early that morning twice, and that evening I got back to a transport ship, and they operated on me on the next morning at Southampton. And then they sent me on to Interior Hospital, where I spent approximately 30 days. And I got back to my original outfit. They told me that I didn't need to go back to the front, but I wanted to go back to my outfit that I had trained for over a year in D-Day landing. And after I got back, things were so much different because all of your friends that you knew and trained with, they were not there anymore. And there was something within yourselves that at that time that you didn't want to get acquainted too much with the replacements coming in, because you didn't want to feel the sadness again all over by losing so many of your friends.
Now, you were wounded, but before you were wounded, you were a medic, right?
I was a medic.
Did you get to help anybody before you were wounded?
That morning when we landed, and we were taught to not to go in a group, but to separate out as much as possible, because if a shell would hit, it wouldn't destroy the company, the platoon. So we scattered, and I got back of one of those I-beams that was on these steel I-beams, and I laid there. I thought I was on the sand, but it was like a little hill-like on the beach. And another soldier came up and laid beside me. The first thing you know, we were in water again, laying in the water. And either he said it or I said it. He said, we better get the heck out of here or we're drowned. And he took out back of me. And just as he turned out back of me, he was shot in the leg. And I took care of him out there. And he couldn't walk. And I gave him a shot of morphine to ease his pain. And I dragged him to the water. Water at that time was about, above my knees. And when I finally got to dry ground, I said to him, this is as far as I can take you. I'm just so tired. And I laid flat on the beach, and I threw my arm up like this. And at that time, I don't know whether it was a landmine that went off in front of me or a mortar shell. And I was hit here in the wrist, paralyzed my arm here. And then later in the morning, I still was able to use my right hand, but I couldn't do. The reason why we were told when we landed that we were not to take care of any wounded, that the Navy would be taking care of the wounded. But nevertheless, that didn't work out. And then later that morning, probably another hour, 2 hours, I don't remember, but a soldier said that I had blood coming out of my boot. Well, I didn't know whether it was blood or salt water. And then I realized that I was hit in the left leg. I don't know when that happened because I didn't feel it. because you have so much adrenaline, and you're trying to protect yourself the best you can. And later that day, I remember of standing up on a ramp of a boat that was knocked out, the landing craft, and there were soldiers down below me, and I was standing up there, and one of them jumped up and hit my leg, and because you just didn't know what you were doing at that time. And then I was taken off the beach. They've sent an order down that anybody that was wounded that could go back and get into a landing craft that was landing, to go back the best you can. So went back over the beach again as I saw a landing craft. And I was on I had trained on the USS Charles Carroll at Slapton Sands in England. And so I asked this Englishman who was taking care of the boat, sailor, if he'd take me to USS Charles Carroll. He told me it was a little bit out of his way, but he'd take me. And then they lowered the basket. And the last I knew, I said to him, let's get the hell out of here. And the guy said, we know that things aren't going too well there for you, and we may have to beach this boat for protection. And they gave me a shot, and the next thing I knew, I was being carried off the boat in Southampton.
Tell me now, I'm real intrigued by this now. You're a young man, you're in a small landing craft with a bunch of young men, some who've never seen combat. What's the mood of you guys? What are you thinking about? You thinking about we're going to get killed? You think this is going to be a cakewalk? I mean, you're going towards the beach, the Germans are probably firing at you. What's going through your mind?
When we were in the landing craft, the Higgins landing craft boat, and shells were popping all around, we knew that, like one soldier said, we were visiting hell. He wrote, when the bottom of the landing craft touched the sand and the ramp went down, I was a visitor to hell. So that's exactly the way it was.
Do you think that Steven Spielberg did a good job portraying that, or was it worse than that, or was it too much of Hollywood there? I mean, in the beginning of the movie,
first part of Saving Private Ryan, it was the most authentic part that I've ever seen. Okay. That's when it brought back really memories. But I think Steven Spielberg has done a wonderful job in translating what took place.
How were you trained for something like that? In your medical training, did they tell you it was going to be like that, and it's going to be chaotic? How did they train you?
No, they didn't say anything about how chaotic it was or anything like that. We were just trained to take care of wounded soldiers. We went through mock battles at Slapton Sands, and it was just like he's taking care of anybody. To this day, I studied an overlay map of where we were supposed to be at certain times on the D-Day landing. And I can remember him telling us that the the bombers would go over and bomb the beach, where we would have places to protect us from the craters. To this day, I think they told us a lie, because they didn't want, this is my feeling, that they didn't want the Germans to know just exactly where we were coming in at. They told us a lie. No, it's just like anything else when you're a young man. When we did our training, we knew that sooner or later we'd be in combat. But you didn't visualize what combat was until you were there. And then, just like being sentenced to death, that's the way it was.
Were there men on your landing craft that hit the beach that were killed?
Oh, my land, yes.
So what do you remember about the ramp going down and the order given, and then everybody get out? What happened?
I'll make this story. I've got a little story here to tell you that When the landing craft approached the beach and the ramp went down, there was those who jumped into the water to never touch dry ground. And those that did never lived to see the sunrise the next morning, as it was chaos in the bowels of hell. And it continued. You can see pictures of it, and you can visualize it, but you really don't know until you have been there to see it. It's hard to believe.
Do you think you've forgotten some of that, or it was so bad that you just don't want to remember? I'm not trying to pry, but I'm just saying a lot of the guys seem to have they've lost that part of their life. They don't remember what happened.
Well, there's a lot of that. Every now and then I dream at night, something has happened, but you want to keep a lot of it back. You don't want to, some of the memories have faded away. And what you are more happy with, you're more pleased with what you remember, and of course there's sadness, but our fellowship together.
You consider yourself a hero?
Nope. Just another soldier.
Did that change your life going through that experience, or is it something that you just did, or did it have an long impact on your life?
Well, I think it had an impact on my life after I came back, because the reason why I missed my wife Ruthie, but I missed the fellows I was with, because I had lived with some of them so long that you missed them an awful lot.
What do you think, looking back 60 years ago on D-Day now? The 60th anniversary is in a week or so. I mean, what are your thoughts about 60 years ago D-Day and what D-Day meant to this country? I mean, what do you think about that? The significance of that day?
I think this, that life today would not be like it is today had we failed you at Normandy 60 years ago today. I really believe that. So it's hard to...
Yeah. What does freedom mean to you?
Freedom means that I can enjoy life. I don't have to worry. But the way things are, we all subconsciously think of things that could happen.
Tell me about the price for freedom.
Well, the price for freedom, when you are there in France and you're standing at the Couville Summer American Cemetery overlooking Omaha Beach, and you look at those and your friends, that is the price of freedom. Whether you are at the cemetery in North Africa or a cemetery in England, just the same, that's the cost of freedom.
That's exactly how I felt when I saw all those crosses.
One of the saddest things, when Ruthie and I were there, and I went in and I asked, I gave the lady two names to look up for me, the one that I had a dream about. And she prints out me a sheet of paper, exact location among the 9,700 that are buried there. And she says, the other one isn't here. And I argued with her, and I said, oh, yes, he is too. And so she goes back in the back room, and she comes out. His body had been removed and sent back home by the request of his parents. So I imagine he is either in Galax, Virginia, or Roanoke, one of the twos. I don't know for sure. I know that this July, my son-in-law here, and we are going to Washington to the memorial, and then we're going over to Bedford, Virginia, and first, I've been wanting to go to those two places. And this past summer, Ruthie and I, we went to the D-Day Museum in New Orleans. And I had to wear a tag, a D-Day, you know, that is for those that went in D-Day. And I was there all day. And people started asking too many questions, so I just was another visitor. But it was, it'll be sad because those fellas, I knew some of those fellas that was at Bedford. See, the 29th Division is a reserve division in Virginia and Maryland and part of Pennsylvania. And when I was here in Shenango, Pennsylvania, I was trying to on orders for the 29th Division. And I landed in Glasgow on June the 7th, 1943. And I met my division at Tidworth Barracks outside of London. And from there, our regiment went to Topsham Barracks in at Plymouth, England, and there's where we trained. The reason why we trained at Slapton Sands, of course, we didn't know nothing about this. And I don't think a lot of your big echelons knew anything about it, but Slapton Sands was similar to the beaches at Omaha. And so I don't know how many exercises. The last exercise, we were dressed in our ODs, dress uniform. And that was when we knew that we were going. But we still didn't know anything. We still didn't know anything.
Now, were you a God-fearing man during the war? I mean, did you find yourself praying during that invasion or with other people, or did you have a prayer service on the ship, or what do you remember about that?
No, we didn't have any prayer service on the ship, but we had we had our own chaplain, and he would have special times that we'd all of us get in a group, and we always went to church on Sunday when it was convenient, you know what I mean, because a lot of times we were out. And no, I've always been a God-fearing person, and my wife right there, she is too.
Now, were you married during the war?
We were married.
You were?
Yes.
What year did you get married?
I left Ohio State when war broke out. I was studying pharmacy pre-med at Ohio State. And I worked all night that night at Standard Oil Station, Ohio, and went to bed, slept all day. When I went back to work in the afternoon, and I didn't know anything about Pearl Harbor. And when I got there at the station, I wondered why all the fellows was there. And Matt Maynard, he was the manager of the station, he was there too. This is on Sunday. That's unusual for a manager to be there. And some fellow said, why don't you turn the radio and listen to what's happening? And that was the first I knew, and I just looked at Matt, and I said, goodbye, Matt, and I left. And then
he joined.
Then the next morning, I went down and enlisted at Fort Hays here in Columbus. First, I went down and resigned at the College of Pharmacy there. And then I went up and enlisted at Fort Hays. And they gave me 24 hours. The next day, on the 28th, on the 29th, I reported back and I was sworn in on the 29th. I left there and trained into Camp Roberts, California. And there I was in combat intelligence trained. But I wanted to continue my education, so I asked for a transfer. And then that's when I got into the medical. I worked for over a year in the laboratory there at Camp Roberts, then Fort Sill, Oklahoma, Shenango, Camp Kelmer, boat over. But I have to tell you about this, Larry. When I was in Shenango, they didn't even know I was there because I was traveling. And I'd come home on the weekends.
1940.
1943.
43.
I would come home on the weekends, just go by and back, just see Ruthie. And I called her and one week, and I said, "You get your blood test, I'll get mine. We'll get married Saturday." So I went into Lieutenant Soskins and I said, "Lieutenant, I want a 3-day pass." He said, "The best I can give you is 2 days. You make them out 124, and so I made one out April 3rd, April 4th, April 5th, April 6th. And he signed them. So when we went at the courthouse on the Saturday morning, it was about 11:30, Gerald. I said, they wouldn't take my blood certificate out of Pennsylvania. I said, "Don't you close this place till I get back." So I went up to Fort Hays, and there was a sergeant in the medical center, and I said, "Make me out a blood certificate for Ohio." Sign somebody's name. I was back before they closed the doors, got married. And then when I got back, though, went back, the MPs picked me up at the gate for being AWOL. So I go down and I said, "No, just take me back to my orderly room, Lieutenant Soskins." I didn't show him the pass. I wasn't going to. And Lieutenant Soskins says, I said, "You let me is AWL. I'm not AWL." And I reached my mobile phone. I said, "Look, here's my pass." And after he said, "I made a mistake on the books. Sergeant, he has a pass." After he left, he asked me, he said, "What did you do?" I said, "You told me to make out 2 passes, April 3rd, April 4th. So see, I did get my 3-day pass, but that was 24 hours AWL in between the two.
If you could just tell me again about that young soldier that was you were called out for in December of 1945, and then the story about the milkshake and all that. Tell me that.
It was a Christmas Eve in 1944. And we were either up around Ulick or someplace, I have forgotten. And there was about 8 to 10 inches of snow on the ground. And Bed Check Charlie, came over and bombed, and they hollered for a medic. And so I went to where they were calling, and there were already a couple dead there, but this one was hurt so bad he was beyond any help that I could give him, and I gave him some morphine to ease his pain, and he said to me, "Wouldn't a chocolate milkshake taste good?" I said, "It sure would." And then he said, "Well, I live to see my girlfriend." I said, "You sure would." And I held him in my arms, and he died that night. And that's the only lie I think I ever told a soldier. But I remember that particular incident because that was right there personally, you know. But you know, Larry, that in the winter time, we'd dig our foxholes and sometimes take little cans and build a little fire to keep warm. A lot of soldiers were suffocated from carbon monoxide poisoning, yeah, because they'd covered their hole up with boards or anything that they could get, you know, for protection to keep warm. And a lot of soldiers, they build a little fire on a can or something just to keep warm. And
When I told you that story about that medic that cut off a leg with some scissors, and you said there were things that, you know, you guys did that the medical profession today.
Like I told my doctor, I said, you know, when I was a combat medical man, the things that we did then, today, they would be enough lawsuits to take care of what we did at that time.
But under those conditions, you did what you needed to do.
We did what we needed to do under those conditions. I can remember as a demonstration in England, they were giving me plasma just to show how it worked and everything. And Captain Carter looked at my eyes and pulled it out immediately and then gave me a shot of atropine sulfate because I was having a reaction from the plasma. It was in my, giving me. But we never did any more demonstration like that with plasma.
Tell about the guy's hand you fixed.
I'll tell you, this is a story. We were in an orchard, and things were getting pretty quiet. It was during about the end of the war, and I had the most beautiful foxhole you ever did see. It was almost like a room underneath the ground, and that was the first jet plane we ever heard. Boy, it flew over us, and everybody was diving, and I couldn't hardly get in my foxhole because they're all going to beat me to it. And this one cut his hand right here on a C ration can. I said, I'm going to fix that up and I'll send you back to hospital. Nah, Doc, you fix it up. So I sutured it. And I put sulfamide powder on it. That's what we had at that time, the sulfathiazole and sulfamide powder. And after I was transferred up to Bremerhaven, England, Bremerhaven, Germany, up on the North Sea, he came into my aid station. He said, Doc, he said, I haven't been able to move my thumb very well. What I had done was sutured the ligaments, too, and it healed that way. So then I just sent him back to the hospital. I never did hear from him anymore. Now,
didn't you deliver a baby?
Oh, I delivered 2 babies. One in a coal shed in Germany. And after the war, I went down to, go print this, went down to Major Buckley, and he was smoking a cigarette, and it was burning right through his fingers here. And I told him, this lady's in labor. He said, you handle it. So I delivered another baby there. But anyway, I felt sorry for the major, but he'd smoke a cigarette and go right through his fingers. Never know it. Never know it.
Whoa.
He's the only one that I ever knew that took a morphine.
Marion, tell about the time you got hit on the side of your head.
Oh, I was standing in the doorway in Germany. It was a concrete doorway, and German aircraft came over, strafing. And a piece of metal shell hit right in that concrete. I went like this, and I was bleeding a little bit, and I thought, oh my golly. And it was just the blister, from the hitting the shell, and it was just flying there. But 7 years ago, my blood pressure got over 200, and they did an examination, and they found that this side had a kink in it.
Oh my God.
And I have always wondered since that day, when I was hit with all that powder and that concrete hit whether that caused that aorta hair to form a kit in it. I've always wondered that. Well, I had to have that done first, and then I gave my own blood, and 2 weeks later, I was operated for a hernia on my aorta.
I just want you to give me a salute. Go ahead. Okay, good. Really what I'm interested in, Ruthie, and I've been asking some of the wives these questions, just what was the hardest part maybe of him being gone during the war? I mean, was raising a family, what was it like for you as a young mother or a young wife during the war when he was gone? Tell me about those days.
Well, as he told you, we got married and he left, so that was hard, but we had gone together for a long time. So after he proposed, it took me 4 or 5 years to get him. But it was entirely different because you would wait for one letter, you'd wait for an email, and then when you would get a letter, you would think, well, everything's going to be all right. And we were fortunate because they gave us enough gas to get back and forth to school, because at that time I was teaching. But that was always in the back of your mind. You were hoping that you didn't get anything saying that he had been wounded or something had happened to him. And you automatically had friends whose husbands or sweethearts were in service.
Do you remember instances where some of those friends received telegrams or however they notified them that they were wounded or killed?
Yes, a good friend of mine had, her husband was wounded, but see, we didn't get the telegram until afterwards. Like, for instance, when Marion was wounded on D-Day, the paper came out. They had someone, the boys would come down the street and say, "Spatial," and World War II spatial. And this one morning he came down and he said, "Marion Gray, first casualty." As I told you, I'm not good. And so, just turn it off.
Okay. Yeah, how-
No, it was a, what's that called, John, that they had then? Was a telegram, wasn't it? Yeah. It was the boy came down the street. Now I've got it back now. The boy came down the street and said, "First casualty in Franklin County, Marion Gray." And so we went out and got the paper and we read, and it said "slightly wounded." So that day then, I got a telegram from the War Department saying that he had been wounded on D-Day. And so I didn't know, I didn't hear anything from them, but I kept getting his emails, but they had all been written before this time. So when I got the next letter from him, a nurse had written it and said that he was okay, but that he had been wounded. He would be in the hospital for probably a month, that his leg and arm had been wounded. So, it was just a relief.
But you didn't get to talk to him, I mean.
Oh, no. Oh, no. The only thing we had was their email, and he wrote a lot, and I wrote every day, so he would get a letter from me.
So, I mean, life was different, but what about the rationing and things going on
Oh,
in the
yeah.
country? I mean, everybody was working together in the country,
Yeah,
I mean.
yeah. Well, they rationed food, your sugar was rationed, and all your basic things like that were rationed. And we had to work at school, and the parents would come in, and depending on how many children you had, that was how much sugar you'd get and how much flour you'd get. And if you were fortunate to live near a farm, you could get your milk. But the gas was, you had these little gas, I guess they were,
Coupons?
yeah, coupons. And you would have to really be careful, because if you ran out of gas, you just stayed home. But we were, as I said, we were fortunate because they gave us extra to get back and forth to school. But I can remember this one lady came in and said that she had 5 children, one by her first husband, one by her second husband, and 2 by her third husband, and 1 by herself. But there were funny things that happened like that, but you always had in the back of your mind, you just hoped and prayed that everything would be all right. And every Sunday night, we had a tryst that we would try to figure out the time where Marion would be and where I would be, so that we could have a prayer together.
No, you're okay. What do you remember about D-Day? I mean, I asked these guys, the night before what D-Day was. From the home front,
We didn't know.
Did you hear about when did you first hear about this D-Day in Europe, the invasion?
It was.
What do you remember about all that?
It was afterwards. We did not know anything. I mean, the news was really called because we did not know what was happening really, because they kept it very quiet, and after something was over, then you might get it. But just like that kid coming down the street with that extra dispatch yelling, extra, extra, that was the way we got news. But that wasn't until after it was over, because you know that would get, at that time, that would have been 2 or 3 days afterwards.
Yeah. So you didn't really, and it was a pretty secret operation.
Yeah, it really was very secret.
But I've talked to some French people, and they knew that it was coming. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
it was obvious that we were going to invade, the invasion was coming. But it's interesting to talk to people like yourself, give me a perspective of what it was like. You were living in Franklin County?
Yes.
Yeah, during the
Well,
war.
no, I was living in Columbus, but I taught at Groveport,
Okay.
and we had to drive back and forth every day. But we had to be very careful what we used, because everything was rationed.
Let me ask you one more question. What does freedom mean to you? I mean, as an American, in light of what happened in World War II and the sacrifices that are required, I mean, what does freedom mean to you, Ruthie?
It probably means the freedom to think and do and be what you want to be, and we're free to believe in God, and we're free in a country to speak and say what's on our mind, and we don't have to worry about whether we're going to be going to jail for having our own thoughts. It's a blessing to live in America.
Give me some thoughts about Marion, his service to our country, and is he your hero?
Well, yes, because anyone who has given their time and their service for our country is a hero to me, because they have been willing to take that time, and their attitude was so good, because I had a friend whose husband kept getting deferred because he couldn't enlist, because every time he would enlist they would say no, they needed him more at home. So consequently, he did everything he could to build up his weight so that he could go into the war, because at that time, if you were in service, they were really wondering if you were a good American, because it was such a privilege to serve your country.
That's right. Well, I'm done with you. That was good. You do not look 83.
Oh,
Oh my gosh. And my camera makes you look 20 years younger too. So.
hey, keep the camera.